everybody. My name is Matt Beard. I am the Executive Director at All Out, the global movement for love and equality, and my pronouns are he and him. This session is going to be looking at pride in hostile environments, courage and community in Uganda and Eswatini. I'm just providing a short introduction here to a conversation that I had a couple of weeks ago with Isaac Mugisha from Uganda and Malusi Simelane from Eswatini, two incredible activists who serve their communities by developing and delivering pride events in very difficult environments. We're here this week in Copenhagen, even though, of course, homophobia and transphobia continue to exist in places like Denmark. We are nevertheless surrounded by a level of tolerance and acceptance that just doesn't happen in many criminalized countries around the world. And it therefore takes enormous courage, tenacity, and perseverance to deliver this precious moment of solidarity and community that is pride in criminalized countries. I've had the personal privilege and pleasure to be in Uganda and Eswatini for Pride events, and I'm incredibly proud that All Out, through its crowdfunding program, has supported these Pride events across the African continent. We are moving now to the conversation, and there will be some opportunities for everybody to ask some questions at the end. Thank you so much for listening.
Hi, everybody. So we're here now as part of this presentation about pride in hostile environments, talking to two of the leading pride organizers in Africa right now. With me, I have Malusi Simelane, who is the founder and executive director of Eswatini Sexual and Gender Minorities, and Isaac Mugisha, who is the coordinator of Pride Uganda. Thanks both for joining us. It's great to have you with us today. And I just want to say to everyone that you can't see Isaac on screen right now, and that's because he's just returning from an emergency where he's had to go and see his brother, who unfortunately has been admitted to hospital with a case of COVID. And he's in the car, so we can't see him, unfortunately, today. But I just want to kick off by just asking you both a little bit about the history of pride in your country. Can you just give us a short overview of how pride has developed? I'm going to start with Isaac, because I know that history goes back a little bit further in Uganda than it does in Eswatini. So yeah, Isaac, tell us a little bit about pride in Uganda.
Thank you so much, Matt. I would definitely just dive in and I mean, I'm not one of those that really knows so much about the history, but all I know is in 2012, a group of activists really led by Kasha, Naba Gesera, and a group of other activists really came together and thought about a concept of pride in the Ugandan context, what it meant, what, you know, a community like that, a community that had started way back in 2003, would actually envision as pride in their context. So a group of few activists really decided, and you know, they were like, let us just do something, you know. We know it might not be successful. We know pride for us is a protest, but it is good to try. So our pride starts from 2012. And that's when the movement really put up something that we could call an event of a sort. So 2012, a group of maybe 50 to 60, 70 activists came together and marched and said, you know, we are going to march, we're going to walk, whether for 1 minute, whether for 5 seconds, we are going to take a stance against, you know, abuse of LGBT rights in Uganda, against abuse of, you know, human rights and targets that are really made on the community. And of course, that was a time when we had the Anti-Homosexuality Act that was going to be introduced. By that time, it was introduced in 2009, and then there was a bit of laxity between 2009 and 2014. So between the time, the community decided to organize something called Pride. I would tell you for sure this wasn't something that was a good idea according to the government, and they were not ready for this. But it was one of those eye-openers where the government was shocked, the police were shocked that there are people called the sexual minorities that could actually get out of their houses without fear, without any threats, without anything, and move on the street and march. this was not one of the successful ones. They were not lucky, of course, as I would say, but at least there was a lot of media attention that was obtained. There was a lot of publications that came out of Uganda by that time. LGBT rights in Uganda became a topic, a conversation by each and every office. And this to me, at that time, I would say, I was in my university and I was already struggling with my sexuality as a person, and when I was watching the news that evening, here came something to do with LGBT pride in Uganda. I had never been shocked like that.
Well, Isaac, we're losing you a little bit there, so I'm gonna pass it over to Malusi for a bit and hope that the connection improves, because we've got the first half of that Pride history in Uganda now, but there'll be more to come. Some of that history I kind of know and saw myself. So Malusi, your history in Eswatini goes back not quite so far. With your first ever Pride, I think in 2018. And so tell us a little bit about that.
So it's just been 4 years for us, and it's so exciting because it has grown and evolved and has meant so much for our lives. And the first one, of course, in 2018, which was held through the support of Out and Proud, was a proud moment. And funny, it's pride, and it was a proud moment, which is touche, because we hadn't thought about it. We just, it's not something that we ever saw happening in a absolute monarch, the last absolute monarch in sub-Saharan Africa. So it just, nobody ever imagined, though people used to go to South Africa every now and again because they hold Pride almost throughout the year, Cape Town, March, Johannesburg sometime in June, and then sometime again in September. So we never thought it would happen for us until this idea came after a conversation with the then ambassador of the United States, when she, used to invite us for dinner at her house in June, to say, yeah, I'm just inviting you for, Pride commemoration. And then we thought, maybe it's time we do this. Maybe it's time we invite her to our event instead of vice versa. And then we started making conversations. We reached out to All Out. They were happy to help us. And it became so beautiful. And again, like it did happen in Uganda, as Isaac is saying, it shocked a lot of people, I mean, not that people did not know about the existence of LGBT people in the country, but they did not think it was possible. Mostly the authorities, who at first did not want the event to happen. I mean, even after giving us the permission, just to closer to the date, they started to back out of it. I don't know why, maybe anxiety. But during the day, I remember there was a large number of the police, even some of the top brass in the police force, who were just there watching everything. And when we were done marching, they called us to say, "Oh wow, that was nice, that was calm." So it got me thinking that perhaps it was the anxiety of protest marches like from the trade unions, which can always get very complicated and tricky. Which again, I always blame the government, of course, because they don't allow people to express freely. But it was a beautiful event. It was really a beautiful event. And then 2019, it happened again. And then I think in 2019, that is when it started to get political for us. This is when we started to say, we need to grow up, even though I then started an organization called Eswatini Sexual and Gender Minorities, which actually came out of seeing the success of Pride and seeing what we can do if we can have an LGBT specific organization. So that is why we then started to say, what is the meaning of Pride? What happened in 69 in New York? What inspired the people? What made it happen? So we had to find something that means something to us and makes sense for us. So now, as it is, we of course commemorate the International June, which is Pride Month. But in September we also do something. But we have now agreed that in June, instead of doing two celebrations, in June we do the celebration, and then in September we do a national LGBT conference where we come together, and then we'll have that high-end dinner at one of the evenings in September. And the reason we chose September is because we were looking at the colonial common law offense of sodomy. And this is what we thought is the battle that we need to fight. And considering what Marshall P. Johnson and the other trans woman, I forgot her name, were fighting in 1969, it was oppression, it was injustice. So we thought it's important that when we celebrate Pride, we're not just celebrating, but we're rioting some sort of injustice. So it's been really great. I mean, this past month, we had again a commemoration of International June Pride Month, and we had the the new US ambassador speaking there. I mean, unfortunately, this time around, I was personally not there in heart because of the unraveling political unrest in the country, because I'm more interested in that in terms of just opening up the space so that we can finally, as LGBT people, integrate into broader society. But Pride has been really great, and I look forward to more.
Isaac, I don't know if you're back with us. We lost you as you were kind of getting probably about halfway through the history of Pride in Uganda. Are you able to pick up on that again?
Yeah, I was talking about how inspired I was as a university student who was just 22 at the time, and looking at a group of activists, just 50 of them, a handful of them, but really the whole courage, the whole motivation and the commitment they had was to make sure they make a statement. So me as a young person in 2012, I got inspired as a person. And then so many of my other friends at campus, at university, were all like, is this happening in Uganda? There's actually a group called LGBT groups in Uganda. And this is how we all came up. Now, of course, going forward, 2012 Pride, there was a lot of chaos as well. That was the first one, but it came with, first of all, I would say the negatives and the positives. To me, it greatly achieved because, Pride in context of Africa and in Uganda, where I come from with anti-LGBT laws, would definitely mean you are going to protest against these laws. You're going to protest against police brutality. So definitely seeing that, the statement was made, the police was in action, the government was in action, the media was involved, meant that they had actually greatly achieved for me. And so most of us pick our inspiration from the first Pride, which is 2012. Then 2013, a small group of people still insisted, much as there was a lot of brutality in 2012, a lot of arrests that were done. Still, 2013, a group of committed activists still came up, organized, and Pride happened. 2014, I joined Pride in 2015 as an assistant coordinator, and this was one of the greatest events I would ever tell you about. I think 2015 was when so many young people, not necessarily about the whole notion of saying Pride is about promotion, Pride is about, this is the Pride where so many young people, university students, very many civil society organizations, um, government ministries that were working with the LGBT community came and supported us. I remember we did so much of local fundraising, going to different organizations locally, going to different individuals that we know that could actually support Pride. And I remember it went on smoothly. We had, I would say, it was one of those statements that we made that made the community here realize that actually the LGBT conversation is serious and anyone else needs to get to it. So now, of course, this did not go well with the government. Of course, when these events are successful, of course, when they wake up and see ambassadors attended all these events, civil society organizations attended these events, lawmakers was part of them, and pictures were flying all over about that. So now, the Minister of Ethics and Integrity started targeting and knowing, you know what? So now I am losing my job. To him, he thought he was losing a job. And 2016, which was supposed to be one of those other events to count on and blast, was another, I would say, another mess, but also in a very good turn as well. I remember, Matt, you attended this, and you were there for the events, and as organizers, we're really excited about it. It was one of those that we'd count on and say, Pride is now going on in Uganda. We celebrate Pride in Uganda. And boom, we had, opening event that was successful, very colorful, very well attended. And on our Mr. and Miss Pride event, which is one of those that they call Pride. Because apparently the notion in Uganda here is that Pride means men being women, cross-dressing, I would say, um, having sex in the at the venue. So that's what they were looking at. And of course, the design of our Mr. and Miss Pride events was basically to celebrate diversity and mostly to look at, how do we inclusively put our transgender community and, say, what, cross-dressing is okay. Being trans is actually what we celebrate more. It is the first of the LGBT community in Uganda currently. So of course, when the police raided the event and and they could, I mean, their interpretation was that men are dressing in are putting on dresses, women are putting on suits, and so it's an event to celebrate and promote homosexuality in Uganda. That was the notion that the police took out of the event, and unfortunately, the event was raided with over 300 people in attendance, and we had a lot of casualties, we had a lot of injuries. And, you know, as an organizer that I was, as a coordinator of the event that I was, even when we tried to evaluate the event, we actually realized, wow, this is one of those events that has actually celebrated what LGBT community is. You know, it actually scares so many people that a powerful community like this would still move into a hall and a room like this in a public space and celebrate that, you know, who they are. You know, and I mean, 2016, we tried to seek police permission. We tried to go all legal, get officials to approve the whole event, go to police, get police security and protection. But at the end of the day, it was a threatening event to the government. They felt, you know, these guys are taking it so fast. But to me, as a person who has read the history of pride in the whole world, and looking at the Stonewall, for example, looking at German history, looking at Denmark history of LGBT movement, I really, really realized that the Ugandan community, the Ugandan movement had moved so fast in just so few years. And that was my motivation out of all this, you know, as an organizer event that was raided, as an organizer of this event that became so controversial to the government, I realized we had moved so fast. And, you know, much as we really had all this happening, we still had the world solidarity as well. Because even when all these fatalities happened, we still went all out, for example, and asked that, you know, we had injuries of people breaking their vertebral columns. We still had issues of that, and the global solidarity for Uganda stood within just a few hours. You know, people all over the world were sending solidarity messages. People were supporting with funding to make sure that we cater for all these hospital bills, relocation of people who were harassed, people who were beaten, people who were, you know, and for me, now this has motivated me from 2016, much as we've not had really so much sounding event like 2016, but we have still pushed and pushed. So now we are talking about 2016, 2017, we still organized, 2018, we still organized. This really rather became quite small events because, you know, as organizers, then when you get a backlash, then you sit back and think, where could we have gone wrong? What can we do right? And then the conversation out of this all post-event meetings were like, you know what, don't give up, continue pushing, look for ways how you can reduce putting the community at risk. Because at the end of the day, we want activists that are really living, you know, we want activists that are alive. So we definitely try to reduce the magnitude of the events that we're doing to look at more rather of how do we do impactful events. And that's why we launched in 2018, we launched what we call Pride with a Project and Pride with a Purpose. So now we look at projects, community projects that push the agenda of Pride, what it is, but also not forgetting that we are in Uganda and the context is different from New York, from any other city. So we're trying now to organize events that talk about Pride, that celebrate who we are as a movement, that celebrate the milestones of the movement, but also in the context that is Ugandan. And that's why there's so much talk about June. So we realize the minister, the government, the police is all awake about June. If you do anything in June, they will say you want to get naked on the street, you want protest on the streets. So now we've tried to say, you know what, the pride context for Uganda would definitely be after June. We celebrate June, we love June. It works for us in all ways, but because it cannot work for us here locally, we try to say October would be our great month as Uganda. Let's use it because October is when we have the independence. Ugandan independence is 9th this October. So we try to look at the independence of the movement as well. That there's a movement that is, you know, growing, that is struggling through and moving through. And so now all our events are targeting October. And yeah, we are really, really, really excited about, you know, things like, you know, the global solidarity that we get, things like, you know, being part of the whole world pride when it's happening. Because for us, that is a motivation. When I moved to New York for the last World Pride, and looked at Stonewall 50, that was the motivation for me to come back home and think of, what would it mean for Uganda to celebrate maybe in 20 years that it's actually very okay, very safe to move on the street and put pride.
Yeah.
So I really look at World Pride as that.
Yeah, it's like a bridge of history, isn't it? Like starting in that on that June day in New York City in 1969, and that bridge of history linking the like young activists that you've described in Uganda today. I want to go back to Malusi and just like ask you just to describe to us briefly, Malusi, like in those years of Pride organizing that you've done, and obviously Pride organizing is just one of many things that you do. But in terms of that Pride organizing that you've done, what would you say was the single kind of high point and the single low point that you've experienced in that work?
I think the high point is realizing the impact that Pride has on a normal LGBT person. And for me, as a human rights activist who has now started to look at the whole movement broader and not just focusing on LGBT rights, but broader in terms of being visible and getting into government and getting into, broader issues even in the region and in the continent, I've realized that it's not enough to just, go out with a t-shirt with the rainbow colors, with, bunny ears, or maybe wearing skimpy shorts. It's not enough for me. In fact, if it were up to me, I wouldn't even attend those parties because I don't think they give me any gratification. But, being a part of it and preparing and planning and then seeing the aftermath and just realizing how much it means to young people, how much it means to individual queer persons who live in families and in communities where they cannot be as brave as I am. And this is where I start speaking about how grateful I am for the small privileges that I have, being able to stand my truth and speak my truth and not have to lose so much. Yes, there's much that I've lost for standing up, but, not having to lose my livelihood. So it's been really great, it's been really great to see what we are doing, because it's not just about changing the legislative framework and then creating an enabling environment. It's also about making sure that this young person waking up that particular day, they know that this is my day. They know that I'm going to be in a community of others who are like me, and I'm going to be celebrating who I am, and the world is going to be joining us. Even though it's become capitalist thing with profiteering, but still, just knowing that the world sees us today, the world recognizes and the world respects us today. It's really great for me.
It's really very inspiring. I mean, the day I was there with you in Mbabane, I could see that work that you'd done having that impact, right? Seeing that way that people were being inspired and given power.
Absolutely. So that's the upside of it. And I think the downside is how draining it is on us as the people on the forefront, because when the party is over, when the curtains are drawn and then, the play is over, the show is over, it's us who have to do the cleanup now. It's us who have to deal with the authorities. It's us who have to deal with the backlash, Everybody else has gone back home. I mean, they're probably hidden from cameras, so no one even knew they were there to celebrate and party. But the stress, even before the actual event and then after the event, you now have to deal with logistics. I think it's been, especially in countries like ours, where even the resources to do this are not, adequately available. And then there's also the legislative framework, which, even though we do have a public order in Eswatini, which enables for freedom to assemble, but that the political climate does not allow for such things. So it's the back and forth, it's the sleepless nights, and it's the insomnia and the anxiety of, is this going to work out? Are this particular business going to support us? So I think for me, the downside has been, the lack of support from many stakeholders who they're happy to support you privately and quietly. But when now it's time to step up, like be seen, be there, then it becomes a different conversation. I mean, I remember I was even talking to you, Matt, about how, I think it was last year or the year before, how KPMG International sort of supports the movement internationally. And I remember sometime in June, I think it was last year or the previous year, a friend of mine who works for KPMG said, oh, hey, I realized at work our website has got rainbow colors now, but no one at work is talking about it. And, I was tempted to go talk to the bosses of KPMG locally, but I'm like, it's not going to come up to anything because they can't do anything. They can't support us openly. So, it's been really, really stressful, because even more than just Pride, just supporting the movement generally, it's been really, really hard trying to galvanize the people, especially the people with the power, the people with the influence. So I think, yeah, but at the end of the day, I think the good side of it always overwhelms and makes it all worth it.
Yeah, it's good to hear that. But I hear you, right? I mean, and especially against the backdrop of like the double whammy that both of you have in your countries, right? Of a growing COVID pandemic and criminalization, like those two things together, they have made Pride organizing really tough. Isaac, what about you? What briefly would you say would be your kind of high points of Pride organizing, the highest point and the lowest point?
Thank you. I mean, I won't so much differ from what Melusi just shared. I mean, for me, like for example, looking at 2016 and going forward up to 2020, the whole community, local community solidarity that comes with, the pain that they go through, that comes with the whole abuse they go through. Like, in 2016, the whole Pride was raided in one of the second event, and we still had two to go. And the community was eager to participate in the third event, even after what had happened the day before, And everyone else was like, more than ever now, I really want to come out. I want to actually participate. We want to protest. Enough is enough, So the whole bit of leading a community that is determined and committed, that no matter what, regardless of what, is for me what actually motivates me every day to think that, what, this right here is the reason why I should continue to organize Pride no matter what happens. And of course, looking at also the global solidarity that we get, as like I said, the motivation that we get and like Melusi said, I, for one, when I look at the global history, when I look at different histories from different countries and see what has happened, what has transpired over the years, how has their Pride come to be what it is now? I get motivated that, what, we have actually tried so much. We've done so much in quite a short time. So we could achieve more in just, if we continue, if we do what we're doing. And of course, for example, when we were ready in 2016, we received over 500 messages of solidarity from different people from different countries. I remember I sat down one evening after a week when it had happened and went through over 400 messages, reading one by one from, all these countries around the world. And the messages of comfort, the messages of love, the messages of, continue doing what you're doing would make me in 2017, say, what, whatever happened in 2016, I put it on the side and I'm willing to go on because the world is appreciating, the world is watching. And also, I mean, some of the messages even from Ugandans who could not make it to the event, but they were supporting you, telling why we're watching you. We cannot be part of that, but we are with you. That for me is, a high point, is what I would think, makes me, wake up every other year and think of Pride events in Uganda. And of course, on the law, so many times we've done this without what you would call the support that is actually needed, the support that is needed to be there. For example, many times, we talk to embassies that you think would actually want to, host some of these events, because we think these are like safe spaces. These are like people who give you courage to, when you're planning, when you're doing everything, they give you support. They support you, tell we're with you. But when it comes times of need, these are some of the entities, unfortunately, that would not be available for you. So there's local entities that are meant to support you. For example, I would say, like looking at embassies, you would think you have a bit of protection from there. You have a lot of even people that are local here that we call local LGBT people. For example, maybe just not. I would not say I'm trying to out people or anything, but you have like an LGBT community. You have someone who is in parliament, for example, someone who's the police that is part of the LGBT community, but in such times cannot actually respond, cannot help the community that is struggling. So for me, sometimes feeling like, there's an LGBT person in a very good position, but cannot come through to help in such times was a bit of a down low. Yes, I understand the context that we live in, But sometimes I also feel like, oh my God, I'm trying to fight for our rights, you inclusive.
Yeah.
You know, maybe this would be the time for you to come out and do something.
Yeah.
But of course, we understand, you know, we all cannot be at the same time. But partly that, yeah.
So let's hope that some of the people in this audience, the stakeholders of multilateral institutions, governments, civil society organizations, listen to that message, right? That it's not just about talking the talk, it's about walking the walk, both for Uganda and for Eswatini. Just, we're really short on time, so I'm going to ask you both for super short answers to a probably quite big question, but just in like a minute or less, can you just give me your vision? Like, we're in 2021 now, 2031, pride in your countries, what does it look like, and how will things develop between then and now? Perhaps start with you, Isaac, and then we'll finish with Malusi.
2030, 8 years from now, looks great to me. It really looks great, but of course, I would still not overdream, but I would think it is going to be a time when we can openly and clearly say there's a bit of society that accepts LGBT people. There's the government that listens to us. There's, you know, a population that thinks we are right to be who we are. So I will not over dream and say, you know, we'll be here, but I'm very sure it looks great, because already it looks great and it is fine with me.
That's amazing. It's great to hear that optimism. Malusi was nodding. So I guess you probably have a similarly kind of hopeful vision, but Malusi, what do you think?
2030 or 2031?
Either 2030, 2031.
I think I'll be old. I think I'll be old. I think I'll be attending as a, I don't know, a dignitary of some sort, but definitely it will be worth seeing, because I don't believe we have put in so much effort for it to remain the same. It needs to mean something to somebody. It cannot just be a party. It needs to push the movement forward. It needs to push the conversation forward. So for sure, we are going to be attending in 2030, and who's to know, even some people, senior people in our government will be there marching with us. So
Yeah.
I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful.
Great. Look, I want to thank you both so much for taking time out of your day to day. I know that Malusi and Isaac both are super busy individuals, so thank you for sharing some time with us and sharing those insights. And thanks everyone for listening.